For the second part of 8.3, our applications to physics and engineering, we're going to look at moments and centers of mass. So we'll run through the definitions and the formulas here pretty quickly in this first video, and then we'll do one or two examples of finding centers of mass or centroids of the particular regions we're going to look at. So just to start off, a center of mass, if we have a thin plate of any shape, when we look at the center of mass, what we're looking for is the point at which it would balance on a fulcrum or on a point. So one way to think of it is a little bit like a teeter-totter. If you have a teeter-totter, and I grabbed this little funny image here, if you've got a teeter-totter, we've got our little Charlie Brown characters here, and one person is heavier than the other person, then the teeter-totter is off balance. So you need more distance for the lighter person from the center point to keep that in balance. So it's sort of the general concept here. So we're going to be looking at two things, both the weight or the mass of the person and its distance from that center point. So just very quickly, I want to run through just the one-dimensional case first. So this is the teeter-totter example. So if you've got a fulcrum, a balancing point, and you have a very thin rod that has no mass, and you put mass on 2 points, then where would you have to put that fulcrum to balance that rod? And so you've got your two distances, D1, D2. You can go ahead and throw this into the number line and actually look at those distances. So here we're looking at, this is our D1 and this is our D2 from the above scenario where we had this image. Just now putting it onto a number line and saying, okay, if mass 1 was placed at X1 and mass 2 is placed at X2, then that center point, whatever that point is where we're going to balance, we'll call X bar. And you can just use a little bit of distance subtraction, finding the distances, and then some algebra here. And I will run through this. This is actually called the law of the lever equation. And we can find this guy right here, that mass 1 times D1 equals mass 2 times D2. And we can find that that X bar can be found by taking M2 times X2 plus M1 times X1 over the sum of the masses in the system, M1 plus M2. And it can turn out that actually this is true whether we had just 2 masses or N masses placed along that rod. So this would just expand out if we had, say, 10 masses placed along that rod. We could figure out where that center of mass would be in the same sort of way. So we call M1, X1, M2, X2 the moments of the mass. And then, of course, the denominator here is just the sum of the mass in the system. So these are called the moments. And this is the sum of the mass in the system. Another way to say that would just be the total mass of the system. Okay, so, and just sort of summarizing it here, the X bar is equal to, with the summation notation, the sum from 1 to n of M1, X1, and the denominator is the sum from 1 to n of M1, okay, total mass in the system. All right, so let's keep moving. Now let's consider, what if we had a two-dimensional case? What if we were actually in the coordinate system? So what if we scattered these masses around the coordinate system? Then we would actually have to consider their tendency to rotate around both the x and the y-axis. So what we're looking at here is we're actually taking masses in masses placed at ordered pairs and considering what would be their center of mass. Where would we actually place? So it's a little bit of a strange concept here because we're literally thinking of these masses being placed on some sort of an invisible net that has no mass. We'll get into an actual region here in just a second. We're just building up to that. So, but right now we're considering these masses just sort of placed on an invisible net over the coordinate system at certain ordered pairs. And then where on that net would be the ordered pair? So where, the question is, where on this ordered pair? Let's just suppose maybe right here. You know, what we're looking for is find some ordered pair x, y that is the center of mass, okay? Or the balancing point. I think of it as a balancing point. the balancing point. Okay? So that's what we're looking for. So we're saying, where would that center of mass actually be? And we should put this on it, not just in general, what ordered pair is it, but we're going to label it X bar, Y bar. So where is that center of mass? So if we think about that same concept that we had earlier, what's the tendency to rotate around a specific point? But in this case, it's an ordered pair. So we need to consider what's the tendency of this system to rotate around the y-axis. We call that the moment about the y-axis. And that has to do with the distances from the y-axis. So keeping in mind that this is coming out of the fact that x sub I represents the distance to the y-axis of each of those masses. And for the moment about the, so if we just scroll back up there, so those distances, so for each mass, its distance to the y-axis is x sub I, and for each mass, its distance to the x-axis is y sub I. So this, the moment about the x-axis is coming from, those y sub i's are coming from the fact that y sub I represents the distance to the x-axis. And then, of course, the mass of the whole system would just be the sum of all the masses. And so to find x bar, y bar, if we have a system, a two-dimensional system, to find that ordered pair that would center that system, we would find x bar would be the moment about the y-axis, m sub y over m, and y bar would be the moment about the x-axis over the total mass of the system, m. So we could do this with some numbers, but because I want to keep this video a little short and I want to jump into the actual regions where we're going to use some calculus, I'm not going to do this example, but we could do this example pretty quickly. Just place those masses at those ordered pairs and plug into these formulas up above. So I'm gonna skip this simple example and jump right into looking at some actual regions where we'll need some calculus. So let's go to what's called a lamina. So if we had a flat plate, we call it a lamina. It has uniform density. We are going to be specific about that in this case. We can get into varying density of plates, but that comes in multidimensional calculus. So you can revisit this topic when you get into multiple dimensional calculus. But for now, we'll consider that we have a uniform density. So the density does not change throughout this plate, this lamina. It's a flat plate, and it is infinitely thin. That's also something that we're going to consider. So it's got uniform density and it's infinitely thin. It lays in the rectangular coordinate system and occupies some region R, just as we've shown. Now, the centroids, we're actually going to have a new definition here. The centroid is the center of mass of this type of plate. So somewhere in this plate, and I'm going to just put like maybe right here, lies a point, we'd call it x bar, y bar, that we call the centroid, or the center of mass of this plate. So this is the centroid of this lamina. So how would we find that? Well, we're going to find it in the exact same sort of way that we found it in the other two simpler examples that we looked at above. But here we're going to have to divide up this plate like we've done with other physical examples in this calculus section. We'll have to divide it up into rectangles and consider what happens when we do that, divide it up into n small rectangles. So one thing that we will utilize as we're setting this up is the symmetry principle. And so if we have a symmetric region R about a line L, then the centroid will lie on that line. So we'll kind of keep that in mind. If this region were symmetric, we could look at that line L, whether it be a vertical line or a horizontal line, and we would know that the centroid lies on that line. Okay, so again, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, typed it up so that we could go through it quickly and get into the formulas. So the centroid of a lamina, if we say f of x is a continuous function and r is above the x-axis, then we can split up the region from a to b into subintervals and choose a tag on each subinterval. Now in this case, we are actually going to let that tag be the midpoint. So x sub r is actually the midpoint, so we could call that x bar if we wanted to. Okay, I should say x sub I bar. Okay, so it is actually the tag we're going to use for this proof is going to be the midpoint. Then if we build the rectangles on each of those intervals, the height of the rectangle will be f of x sub I bar. And by symmetry principle, rectangles are symmetric about two lines. Rectangles are symmetric vertically, but they are also symmetric horizontally. So we already know for each of the rectangles what the centroid would be. The centroid would have to be the center point of the rectangle, which by our definition of our rectangles is x sub I bar and 1/2 of f of x sub I bar. So I have a little picture down here, and you can see where that centroid lies. So here is that, the centroid of each rectangle is right there. It's the midpoint of the subinterval, and it's the midpoint of the function, 1/2 of f of x sub I bar. Okay, so and then the area of each of those rectangles, of course, is f of x sub I bar times delta x. Now, the mass of the rectangles, and I just want to pause for just one quick minute here. The mass is normally density times volume. Excuse me. Density times volume, but because we have an infinitely thin, so I'll just make a little star right here. These regions, and again, we're kind of simplifying things just a little bit in this calculus. In calculus 2, we simplify things a little bit because we're not in multidimensional calculus yet, and we're looking at these infinitely thin plates. So that is why instead of having volume right here like we would normally have, we're looking at area, because the plate, the lamina, is infinitely thin. Okay, and so in this scenario, it seems kind of weird, but we're literally saying area is approximately volume. Okay, so we are making that assumption here for this particular formula, because we've got infinitely thin plates. Okay, so then what is the moment about the y-axis? So what is the moment? What is the tendency of this particular lamina that we have graphed here, that we've broken up, defined as we have with f of x being a positive function from a to b? What is the moment of that region to rotate about the y-axis? So the tendency to rotate about the y-axis has to do with the mass and the distance to that rectangle. So the moment about the y-axis of each rectangle is actually the, if we go back here, we've got this up here, it's actually the area of the rectangle, the density times the area, so the mass, so this is the mass of each rectangle. And this is the distance of each rectangle from the y-axis. So x sub I bar, if I could draw on this picture, I don't want to put too much on here, but that represents the distance to the y-axis, x sub I bar. So we are looking at the moment given here. So the moment, the tendency to rotate that rectangle, to rotate about the y-axis, is rho x sub I bar, f of x sub I bar, delta x. We add all of those up, and then we take the limit as n goes to infinity, and we can see that the moment actually ends up being an integral, whatever that density is of that plate, times integral from a to b of x f of x dx. Okay. Now, what's the tendency to rotate about the x-axis? Well, it's the same sort of thing. It's going to be, so if we consider back here, sorry to rotate around too much, but it's the tendency to rotate about the x-axis. So what is the mass and what is the distance to the x-axis? So the mass is going to be the same. So we've got the mass here, m sub I, and d sub I. And this gives us, oh, d sub I, let me write that on here too. So remember that this time we're talking about to the x-axis. So this distance right here to where that center is, this is, remember that this represents 1/2 f of x sub I bar. So that distance to the x-axis. And so we've got the distance to the x-axis, the mass of the rectangle, and notice there when we have rho f of x sub I bar delta x times 1/2 f of x sub I bar, we end up getting rho times 1/2 of f of x sub I squared delta x. And when we add all of those up, we end up finding that the moment about the x-axis is 1/2 rho integral from a to b of f of x squared dx. So the mass of the whole whole lamina. So one more piece, because remember, to find the centers of mass, we take the moments and divide by the total mass. But the total mass is going to be the density times the area. And again, remembering, it's always a little weird to say mass equals density times area instead of density times volume, but remembering that we've got this infinitely thin plate that we're looking at. So we have no z-axis, we have no thickness in a third dimension. Okay, so we've got density times area, rho times integral from a to b of f of x. So one last formula to pull together here. And we find that the center of mass of the centroids, and there's a lot of symbols here on this little summary, and I want to focus in on just the bottom, but quickly remembering what we're doing here. The moment about the moment about the y-axis over the mass represents where our x bar is. So we've got those two formulas that we just stated up above. We take those, we divide the two. It turns out that the densities actually cancel out, and we end up getting the integral from a to b of x f of x dx divided by the integral from a to b of f of x. And y bar is the moment, the tendency to rotate around the x-axis divided by the total mass, m sub x over m. And we get a similar simplification. The densities cancel, and we get 1/2 a to b of f of x squared dx divided by integral from a to b of f of x. So those two formulas simplify down to these pieces right here. So x bar, if we actually just defined a to be the area of the lamina, so a, in simple terms, a equals the area of the lamina, and our area formula, of course, is an integral from a to b of f of x dx. So if a is the area of the lamina, if we calculate the area of the lamina, and then x bar is going to be just 1 over a times integral from a to b of x f of x, and y bar is going to be 1 over a times the integral from a to b of 1/2 f of x squared. All right. Okay, so one last, I'm going to do these two examples in a different video. Actually, I think I'll do one example in a video, and if we want to, we'll talk about the second example in the class session. But want to jump to just one more formula while we're in our formula lecture here, and that is, what if we had a lamina that was not defined by just one function? What if the lamina was defined by two functions? And in this case, we'll make sure that we say that one, will define the function that's larger be f of x, so f of x is the larger function. Then what would be the centroid of this particular lamina? And it's very similar. The rectangles this time have a bottom, so rather than going f of x down to the x-axis, we've got f of x minus g of x as our height of each of those rectangles. And so what we end up with finding is that these are our two formulas. So x bar is 1 over a x times f of x minus g of x dx, and that's the area. A is the area, and y bar is 1 over a 1/2 of f of x squared minus g of x squared, and a is the integral from a to b of f of x minus g of x. Okay. All right, so again, we're going to go ahead and do this example in a separate video, but that summarizes our formulas for finding the centroids or center of masses of an infinitely thin plate, a lamina.